Okay, welcome to part 2. This is the Grant et al. Study, so we'll finish off the procedure. The procedure is the longest bit of this study, and then the findings and the conclusions are very straightforward. So the sample, first of all, 8 members of a psychology class, a lab class rather, were the experimenters. So they all recruited 5 friends or acquaintances to serve as the participants. There's 39 participants in total, ranging in age from 17 to 56 years. Yeah, you might think, right, hang on, 8 times 5 is 40, so why only 39? It's because one participant's results were omitted from the analysis, scored particularly poorly, so to be honest, it was probably someone who wasn't concentrating or didn't want to be there or something. So sometimes you get rid of these anomalies. Mean 23.4, so 23-year-olds essentially, 5.9 standard deviation, so not a massive difference, but yeah, around you, a fairly broad number of people, 17 to 56, not just students that are being tested. 17 female, 23 were male, 1 participant was all submitted. So each experimenter ran 1 participant for each of the 4 conditions. Okay, so you if you are in part of that psychology lab, you got one of your friends and ran them in each one of your friends or acquaintance in each of those conditions. Okay, and the 5th person that you recruited, the instructor assigned, so the researcher will have assigned them to a remaining condition. Okay. Experimenters randomly assigned their participants to their 5 conditions. Okay, so they weren't to do it based on anything, they just randomly assigned them. The procedure: each experimenter was asked to bring his or her own cassette player and headphones. Okay, for those of you who don't know what a cassette player is anymore, it looks a bit like that. 8 cassette copies containing background noise recorded during lunchtime in a university cafeteria. So they made copies of 1 recording that was just a recording in a cafeteria. They just wanted background noise. There's no significance to this, to the fact that, you know, occasionally there's distinct words or phrases embedded with general conversation. That wasn't intentional to embed particular words. That's nothing. It's just if you record your cafeteria, every now and again you'll hear someone go, "Oh, that's funny," then their voice will come above everybody else's. So it's generally background noise, movement of chairs and dishes, and the tape was played at a moderately loud level if you were in that noisy condition. 2-page 3-columned article on psychoimmunology by Hales 1984 was the material to be studied. They've just picked something that people can read. I mean, you know, you want to think about that for the evaluation. Perhaps is it the best material to use? But they are trying to use material which would normally be revised for example, a psychology exam. So they're giving them, that is the actual article there. It doesn't matter what's in it. The point is they were given an article, 2-page, to read, to study. Then they've got the 16 multiple choice questions, each consist in a stem, so a question and 4 alternatives, A, B, C or D. 10 short answer questions were derived from those multi-choice stems, okay, that could be easily restated to produce a question that could be answered unambiguously with 1 single word or phrase. Okay, so like you can see down there, if you're in full screen, you've got some multi-choice questions. They're not actually from the study. That's an example of a multi-choice question with 1 stem and 4 answer questions. But yeah, so that they're asked these questions, and then the short answer ones are going to be just requiring 1 or 2 or a single phrase, but they're deriving them from the multi-choice questions so that it's limiting the kind of responses that you could make. If you wouldn't ask questions like, what did you think of the article, or, you know, where was the word "the" used. They wanted it to be specific questions that could be marked as either correct or incorrect, and they're trying to replicate exams. Sometimes in exams at university you've got short answer questions, and sometimes you've got multi-choice questions. Other times you've got essays, but that isn't being measured here. The short answer test was always administered first to ensure that recall of information from the article was being tested and not recall from the multi-choice test. Okay, they didn't want some of these distractor answers, out of the 4 options. They didn't want some of those to be remembered and used in the answers. So they always did the short answer open questions first. The instructions were given to them to begin with, describing the experiment as a class project, stating that participant was voluntary, were read aloud. Okay, so remember, it's these members of the psychology class who are carrying this out, so they have to standardize these instructions and everyone has to give the same instructions. A little bit of evaluation there. They are going to be obviously read differently depending on the person who's carrying it out. Participants were asked to read the given article once. If they were reading it as if they were reading it for a class assignment, they were allowed to highlight and underline as they read. They were informed that their comprehension would be tested by a short answer and a multi-choice test, so they knew that they were going to be tested on it, just like you would in class. All participants wore headphones while they read. Those in the silent condition were told that they would not hear anything over the headphones, whilst those in the noisy condition were told that they would hear moderately loud background noise, but they should ignore it. Okay, so everybody is wearing headphones, whether there is noise coming out of them or not. That's headphones. Okay, so they're trying to standardize that. The feel of headphones on your head it doesn't become a confounding variable. Reading times were recorded just to see if that impacted. If you found that some participants weren't managing to read it in a certain amount of time, or were spending much longer than everybody else. If one participant took an hour on reading the article, then they're potentially going to do much better on the test than someone who took 5 minutes. So they're doing that to check that the reading times weren't significantly different. A break of approximately 2 minutes between the end of the study phase and the beginning of the test was incorporated to minimize recall from short-term memory. Okay, so like in real life, you're going to have a big gap between learning something and your exam. They're trying to replicate that as well, otherwise there'll be things rattling around our short-term memory that you'd be able to access very easily. The short answer test was given, followed by a multiple choice test. Participants were tested in either silent or noisy conditions and were all informed of the condition before testing. Okay, and again, everyone's wearing headphones throughout, both learning and recall. At the end of the testing phase, participants are debriefed concerning the purpose, and the entire procedure lasted about half an hour. So the whole thing took about half an hour of their time. Right, the key findings. One participant was omitted, as I've mentioned, because they were below the standard deviation on both tests. But this table shows the mean reading times, the mean number of correct on the 2 tests as a function of the study and the test. So we've got the 2 conditions, silent and noisy, and also the testing condition. So this is the learning condition. This is the testing condition. First of all, we've got the reading time for the different groups. This means the mean, standard deviation, mean, standard deviation, okay, for the silent and noisy. You've got the short answer tests and you've got the multi-choice tests out of 16. Okay, so these are being scored out of 16. These are being scored out of 10 for the short answers. And what can we see in the data? Well, first of all, if you glance over the reading times, there's not any obvious significant differences there, and that is what they found. There weren't any significant differences in the reading time, so that's good. It's not down to how long they spent reading. Okay, but the short answer tests, we can see some differences here. If you're in a silent study and a silent recall, so if it's the matching condition, you're going to do better than the people who have learnt in silence and are recalling in noisy, and the opposite for the noisy. 5.4 to 6.2. And were they statistically significant? Yes, they were. So I've highlighted those key improvements. These are the best performers. And you can see that the best performers on both tests were those who were recalling in a matching condition to that they learnt. If you were recalling in a different condition, then your performance was hampered. So overall, no significant difference in the reading times, but there were significant differences in your short answer test results out of 10 and your multi-choice tests out of 16. The F value for that, which is ratio of two mean squared values, essentially it's a statistical test. If it's close to 1, then you're going to accept your null, but 6.79 means that it is highly significant, showing that studying and testing in the same environment produced better results. Okay, so that's what they hypothesized, and that's what they found. There was no overall effect of noise on performance. Now that's interesting, isn't it? If you revise with music on, then it's not going to impede your performance, but only if you're doing your exam with music on or with noise. Yeah, so that's the problem with this study. Is yes, it not the problem with the study, that's the problem with revising with music and noise in the background. Is yes, it wouldn't impact you if you were actually doing the tests in noisy conditions, but exams are done in silence, so you get this decreased performance. So the conclusions, straightforward. Context dependency effects for newly learned meaningful material, regardless of whether a short answer test or a multi-choice test was being used. So they did find this evidence of context dependency. Studying and testing in the same environment leads to enhanced performance. So essentially you should revise in silence because your exams will be in silence. So, and that's what they say. Students are likely to perform better in exams if they study for them with minimum background noise, because although there was no overall effect of noise on performance, the fact that there was evidence of context dependency just suggests they're better off studying without background noise, as it will not be present during actual testing or exams. Okay, so it's an interesting application that they're arguing there. Right, everybody, summarize it, and yeah, pop it into cue cards, do what you will with it, but make sure you learn it off by heart. Okay, thanks everybody.